Hello, Vlad with a new story from my channel of amazing stories from life. Irina considered herself lucky. After all, she didn't end up in an orphanage right away. She grew up with her grandfather until she was 10. He loved her, protected her from her violent father, pitied her, and often said, "Just have time to soak up love." That's the most important thing in life, to have someone who's willing to give everything for you. And why was there? You are and you always will be, Irochka replied. She was still little and ignorant then. She thought their tea parties, their trips to the forest, the river, and working in the garden together would all last forever. Oh, Rish, I'm so old already. You know what? Promise me one thing. You'll never sell the house, no matter what. Quote. When I'm gone, her grandfather noticed the tears in his granddaughter's eyes but continued, "Come on, my girl, that's just life. I'm not eternal, but I'll keep an eye on you from up there." The tall, thin man stroked her red, curly hair, his well-used, sinewy hand, which for Ira was the most tender thing in the world. She didn't remember her mother. She died in childbirth. The grandfather sat her on his lap, hugged her with some incredible tenderness and continued, "Listen, I honestly do everything I can. I try to live, but I don't feel well, that's how it is." Quote. And then the girl gave her instructions on what to do if one day he doesn't wake up. She should go to the neighbor, and never write to her father in prison. After all, he has been deprived of parental rights, and in general, he is nothing but trouble. The grandfather sighed heavily as he told how he talked Matira out of marrying this troublesome man and described in detail how Irina would then end up in an orphanage. Of course, it's not very pleasant, but it will be better this way. And then she'll get an apartment from the state, and she'll inherit the house too, but she can't sell it under any circumstances. Why are you crying? I told you, everything will be fine. You remembered what I said. The girl wiped her lips and nodded, swallowing tears. She stubbornly shook her head and said, "You're not leaving me. You can't do that. Mom left me, and you want to. Why? What's wrong with me?" Quote. Wow, such adult questions. When you grow up, you'll understand, but for now, I'll tell you this. You're very lucky. You know, the doctors barely saved you, and you could have died like your mother. And your mother was waiting for you, calling you a little piece of luck. You were just unlucky with your father. There's nothing to say about that, but you were lucky there too. He was locked up for a long time, and I was able to take care of you. So remember, my green-eyed one, you're lucky. Ira imprinted all those words of her grandfather's into her little heart and often repeated them. After that conversation, her grandfather lived another year. Doctors later said it was a true miracle. He should have been dead long ago, given his health problems. And Ira proudly thought that her grandfather lived for her. From then on, whenever she was going through a tough time, she recalled that conversation and repeated to herself, "I'm lucky. I can't afford to slack off." It became her life motto, but things weren't easy. She seemed to have married well, or so she thought then. But then it turned out that kind and affectionate Lyosha, a squat blonde man, sometimes liked to live lavishly and spend his money on restaurants, mistresses, and whatever else he did on his so-called business trips. Just don't tell your mother, and I'll change. This is the last time. You'll see, it's just a complicated situation. I would tell you, but that's not a woman's business. I don't want to ask, but if you'd taken out a loan, I'd have started over from scratch. He looked at his wife with his fierce eyes, without a shred of conscience, and added with no small amount of impudence. You dreamed of things getting better, didn't you? Ira sighed. She'd put up with Alexei for 3 years, and now she knew for sure they had to get a divorce. Of course, she hadn't taken out a loan or broken up with Lyosha just because his mother had been hospitalized with a stroke. And she hadn't even learned all the details. Irina and her mother-in-law weren't on the best terms. Tatiana Gerasimovna wasn't thrilled that her wonderful, homely, college-educated son had chosen a simple store clerk, let alone one from an orphanage. But Ira saw that her husband's mother, a decent, hard-working woman who had spent her entire life as a nurse, had raised her son single-handedly. My mother-in-law never revealed any details about Lyosha's father. Well, Ira didn't ask why she should bring up someone else's pain. It was enough that Tatiana Gerasimovna's face became unsteady and tearful at the memory of her husband's departure from the family. Tears welled in her eyes, and her eyebrows rose sadly above her deep-set brown eyes. Lyosha, I'm not going to take out a loan for you. Don't even dream about it, and I only tolerate you for your mother's sake. Someone has to visit her. Quote. Ira waved her hand sadly. She already realized she'd made a mistake. Her husband couldn't be fixed. At first, when they met, Alexei had seemed kind, intelligent, and gentle. But now she saw that this was how Lyosha treated every woman he was attracted to. The same words, the same half-absent-minded smile, the banal compliments, and the promises to get the moon from the sky. In her inexperience, Ira had once mistaken this for a great love that would last a lifetime, but now she understood. There's no point in expecting changes. He'll remain a lax, irresponsible womanizer and will hope that someone will solve his problem. After all, this was her first love, and she had no experience before, so for more than a year, Irina, gritting her teeth, simply tolerated the betrayals. Then suddenly, an understanding came. Alexei, of course, wasn't the worst person, but he didn't love her. Ira herself read this in the messages on his phone with one of his regular lovers. She made the decision to leave immediately after her mother-in-law recovered. She wasn't going to convince Lyosha of this, who continued to believe that she loved him madly. Why waste her energy on this? Her husband allegedly proved that everything would be different, but life only lasts. Alexei wasn't the kind of person who was ready for even the slightest feat for her. On the contrary, it was she who should, in his opinion, taking out loans, sacrificing, running the household, paying for utilities and buying their groceries from her salary. And all the while listening to her husband's lies to Tatiana Gerasimov, not about him supporting the family. Yes, she felt sorry for her mother-in-law, but the elderly woman loved her only son. Irina, on the other hand, was a stranger, probably just another wife. After the wedding, Ira learned it was her third marriage. When the difficult conversation with her husband ended, Ira was getting ready to go to the hospital to visit her husband's mother. She went to the mirror and saw a short, slender, red-haired young woman there, quite sweet, with plump cheeks and green eyes, a neat, round face and regular features. We won't tell our secret to anyone, don't be afraid, Ira whispered after turning around and seeing her husband watching TV in the room behind the tightly closed door. He simply won't know you exist. That's all. I won't let him ruin our lives. 2 weeks ago, Ira found out she was expecting a baby. It was on the very day she read his correspondence with a very wealthy and rather dangerous businesswoman, in which her husband promised to leave for this Natalia, and she, in response, threatened that if Alexei didn't do it, his wife would have a hard time. The whole town knew that it was better not to mess with the widow of the deceased bandit. Although Natalia was 15 years older than Alexei. She looked, however, superb. A brunette with convex curves, tall, with a perfectly cut youthful face, as if she was completely ageless. And to throw dust in her eyes, Alexei did this and that. He achieved her goal. So now she wanted him for herself. Ira was superfluous here. Why didn't Alexei want to tell his wife that she was no longer relevant? Ira didn't understand, but she had no doubt that her husband, who constantly specialized in lying, wouldn't tell her the truth. He had become a stranger and no longer belonged to her. There was no future awaiting them. That's why she wasn't going to tell her husband that she was expecting a child. She had already prepared all the escape routes and planned to live for a while in that same old grandfather's house, so that her husband wouldn't even think of looking for her. I feel sorry for your grandmother, she'll never know about you, Ira whispered to the baby, stroking her tummy. She felt sorry to deprive the elderly woman of such happiness, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't risk her life and the fate of her child. The time had come for her to live for someone else, to bear full responsibility for him. How are you today, Tatiana Gerasimovna? The patient had half her face and body numb. She spoke with great difficulty after the stroke, but gradually she was getting better, and the elderly nurse understood the importance of paying attention to her, even if the woman couldn't really speak. Instead of answering, Tatiana Gerasimovna tried to smile and wave to her left, still healthy hand. It came out weak, but still better than last time. Well, you're on the mend. Irachka will come see you again today. Oh, my golden daughter-in-law. Not everyone would visit. A sick mother-in-law. I wish I had one like that. My son's wife left him, and he won't marry. And my Pavlik, a real darling, met a real snake. And why are good people so unlucky in their love lives? The nurse suddenly fell silent, realizing she might have said too much. Olga Ivanovna was struggling with her conscience. She tried to convince herself it had nothing to do with it, and yet she couldn't forget the conversation between the doctor and the son of this unfortunate patient. Olga Ivanovna had heard clearly what they had whispered about then. She could never complain about anything, if only her hearing. Just do everything smoothly. It would be suspicious if she died so abruptly. There's quite a bit of inheritance there, and questions will immediately arise for me, this Alexei said in a harsh voice, adding, if anything goes wrong, you'll have to deal with Natalia. And don't even think about drowning me, or you'll drown yourself first. The doctor, a bald, mustachioed man, practically adored him, but didn't dare object. Everyone knew that conflicts with the deceased bandit's widow never ended well. In the small town, almost everything belonged to this Natalia. Listen, this is none of my business, of course, but it's somehow inhuman. After all, she's your mother. Dmitry Mikhailovich tried to talk Alexei into changing his mind. But Alexei's face only grew even sterner. He said it as if he'd cut him off. It's none of your business. Besides, she's not my biological father. She adopted me, and then hid me. That's the kind of mother she is. So I don't have to love her. Do you understand? She's just a liar. Dmitry Mikhailovich realized there was no point in arguing. And then he walked around all day with an upset face. Of his 5 children, 2 were disabled, and his wife had health problems too. So the doctor simply couldn't afford to lose this job. But it was clear he didn't see any other way out. So Olga Ivanovna was absolutely clear. If she didn't intervene, no one else would likely help the patient. In fact, she really needed this job too. Her son Pasha worked as a driver, doing his best, but his car needed repairs more and more often, and he was desperately afraid of losing his source of income. Taking out a loan was out of the question. He had to work for cash just to get by. I'll end up working on someone else's car. Quote. I'm a bad son, Pavel sighed. Oh, come on, we have an apartment, we have enough money, and besides, I like working. What's the point of living if there's nothing to do? Well, except maybe raising grandchildren. Well, you don't want to get married anymore, she replied to her son. Olga Ivanovna was being disingenuous. She didn't really like working. Her joints were giving out more and more often, and she was trying harder to make it less noticeable. But what could she do? They had to move. The orderly, hearing Irina's footsteps in the hallway, sighed. That's it, there's no more waiting. It's time to make a decision. Olga Ivanovna had heard that night, Dmitry Mikhailovich had ordered the nurse to add a new medication to the IV. After that, Tatiana Gerasimovna wouldn't die, but she could have suffered irreversible deterioration. Irachka, can I talk to you? The orderly caught her in the hallway, in that very nook where no one could overhear them. Did something happen? Don't scare me. I didn't even hear you sneak up. Irina even turned pale with surprise. Her hands were shaking. Oh, forgive me, my dears, but if I don't say this now, I'll never forgive myself. And come what may. But I've never lived like a bastard, and I certainly don't plan to become one in my old age. Just tell me what happened. You're scaring me even more. Ira took her hand. So, that's it. You better not leave Tatiana Gerasimovna here overnight, otherwise things will be very bad, whispered the nurse, glad she had repented and spoken up. Her heart felt lighter. She quickly told Irina everything and, blushing, added, and, forgive me, I didn't mean to shock you into thinking your husband was still having an affair with that Natalia, but I had to. Anyway, I usually don't meddle in other people's business. Well, don't worry about that, I'm already in the know. But the rest is a terrible story. What inheritance are we even talking about? Tatiana Gerasimovna never had any rich relatives. Ira's insides turned cold. She didn't know what to do. Her husband turned out to be an even more vile person than she thought. Irina still thought he was just a harmless womanizer, easily influenced. She remembered her grandfather's house in the wilderness, and the decision became as clear as a morning onion, when the sun has already risen and illuminates the dewdrops on every blade of grass. Listen, Olga Ivanovna, I'll probably need your help to take her away secretly, Irina said. She couldn't abandon her helpless mother-in-law. After all, she was her baby's grandmother. But she didn't yet know how to explain all this to her or how to take her away discreetly. So she couldn't do without the help of the nurse. After all, she probably knew everything inside out. Well, said A, go ahead, tell me, I'll help. But they'll probably fire me, they'll figure it all out. Oh well, Pasha will call his son. Quote, in the meantime, I need to figure out what to tell your mother-in-law, otherwise she'll get worried and things will get worse, Olga Ivanovna said. Tatiana Gerasimova, listen to me. We need to leave for a while. Your son asked for it. He's in danger from a woman, and we need to hide. But don't worry, everything will be fine. Quote, Irina decided to come up with a softer version of the story. She understood that her son's betrayal could finish off the elderly woman. But I can't, she mumbled with difficulty. My speech hasn't recovered yet. You can, you need to for my sake, and you know, you'll have a grandson or granddaughter, and you still have to babysit the baby. Quote, Lesha will explain everything later. Irina noticed that tears were welling up in the woman's eyes, either from affection or from fear. She herself felt like crying, but she couldn't let go. He's lying to you. Run away from him. Suddenly, as if gathering her strength, the pale mother-in-law whispered and, leaning back on the pillow, began to cry. Well, if you know, it's even easier this way. I'm not asking you, we'll be saved together. They say a large inheritance awaits you. If this is true, then you'll have enough to heal and recover. In the meantime, I'll help you. I can't abandon you. She stroked Tatiana Gerasimovna's hand, and she shook Irina's palm with gratitude. Tears continued to flow from her mother-in-law's eyes. Well, princesses and queens of Nesimiana, the carriage is ready. The women suddenly heard a cheerful, low male voice. Ira looked around. Before her stood a tall, strong, dark-haired man with an athletic build. His brown eyes radiated good nature and calm. But from his posture, Ira realized that this Pavel was only pretending to be calm. He was compressed like a spring and was clearly nervous. Well, then, let's get ready. Olga Ivanovna had already prepared the gurney on which the sick were transported. I'll have it back by morning, but now there's no one anyway. No, I'm on duty today, but I need to hurry. Mom, you better not come back here anymore. I'll come tomorrow and tell you that you quit, you're sick, said Pasha. Then business first, said the nurse and fussed around Tatiana Gerasimovna. A year had passed since Pavel, Irina, Tatiana Gerasimovna and Olga Ivanovna lived in the old house, which, however, was quite suitable for living. As Pasha predicted, Natalia was not going to forgive this escape, and so they decided it was better to hide in that very place that no one knew about. And so, grandfather's house became a safe haven for everyone. Well, here's a present for you for Maximka's birth. Alexei was finally locked up. He tried too hard to please Natalia, and she is not on friendly terms with the law at all. I found out yesterday that he did not live to see the trial. He told too much about his accomplice. Here she is and didn't forgive, said Pavel, picking up Irina from the maternity hospital with the baby in her arms. Just don't tell our mothers, or Grandma Maxim will be upset. He is our own son, after all. Okay, then don't tell her we're getting married. Quote. Sarah smiled. And this, listen, well, you can't hide it. Everyone knows, and in the village everyone thinks we're family, Pasha smiled. He worked as a driver for a local farmer and earned quite well. With this money they managed to finish up the house. They didn't need anything. Tatiana Gerasimovna finally received her inheritance. It turns out that her sister remembered her. She had once taken her parents' apartment from her by deception and survived, but repented before her death. She made a will in favor of Tatiana Gerasimovna. Since the apartment turned out to be a 5-room apartment in the center of Moscow, a very large sum was involved. You know, it's just amazing that Tatiana Gerasimovna was the daughter of a famous lawyer, and then she decided to start all over again in a small town. What kind of sister was she that she had to run away? Sira asked, surprised. Well, she's just a sister, she was biological, and Tatiana Gerasimovna was adopted. And then, after her parents died, this Yevgenia lied out of her mind that this was her parents' will. She believed it. Good people judge by themselves. Oh well, that's all later. Right now, the most important thing is that you're our son. So, Maximka, come into your daddy's arms. Quote. Pavel lovingly took the baby. That's what was written on the birth certificate. Maxim Pavlovich was born on April 16. It was a bright, blooming spring. Ira and Pasha were discussing building a more decent house next to their grandfather's house. They didn't want to return to the city, even though Tatiana Gerasimovna kept trying to foist her inheritance on them, insisting she owed much more for saving their lives. And she fell in love with Maximka with all her heart. However, the newlyweds categorically didn't want to move to the big city. So Olga Ivanovna and Tatiana Gerasimovna decided to live nearby, buying a neighboring house, where they welcome 2 more grandchildren within the next 3 years. If you like this story, please support me with a thumbs up. It's just one action for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you.